Hi there, I'm Rob Poyton from the Innsmouth Book Club, and today I'm on the Oxfordshire borders at the famous Rollright Stones. Now, while it's been shown that there's been activity here since the Mesolithic era, 6,000 years ago, the legend of how the stones came to be is somewhat more modern. It is said that there was a king riding across the countryside here with his retinue of soldiers and knights, and he met a local witch or sorceress who gave him a challenge which he failed, and as a consequence the king and all his soldiers were turned into the stones. So this gives us the three areas that this site is mostly known for. We have the King's Men Circle, we have the King's Stone, and we have the Whispering Knights. So the story is that obviously the king was set apart from his men are all in the circle, but the Whispering Knights is quite interesting because it said that was a group of his soldiers who were actually plotting against him. So they were somewhat apart from the main body of the troops. They were back a little bit, but nonetheless they still got caught up in the curse and turned into the Whispering Knights. Now, it's a lovely story, of course, but as we know historically, the three main sites here were all created at different times, very different times. In fact, the Whispering Knights is the oldest structure here. That dates back to the Neolithic, so somewhere around 3,500 BC. So the King's Men Stone Circle is the newest structure out of the three. The stones are actually Jurassic limestone, so millions of years old, originally would have been under the sea. So that limestone, as you can see, it has a very natural and weathered look, and in fact the famed William Stukeley described it as corroded like worm-eaten wood. So it does give the stones this rather unique shape and texture. People estimate that there were at least 50 more stones originally, but of course a lot of them have been removed or were taken by local farmers, often to make bridges, which is something we'll mention later on with the Whispering Knights. Aside from the origin story, if you like, the most famous piece of folklore surrounding the stones is that they are uncountable. It is said that if you try and count the stones, you get a different number each time. The estimate stands at around somewhere between 65 to 75, that kind of number. But it is said if you can count the stones 3 times and get the same number, then either you get great good fortune or something calamitous happens to you. So I'm not going to take the chance today. I'll let someone else do the counting. The circle is 31 metres across, and as with many such circles, there's very little information. In fact, of course, obviously there's no written record of what the stones were built for or what sort of function they served. We can, of course, guess or make suppositions that they would have been used for some type of ritual, and they still are. In fact, the reason we're here this weekend is friends of ours had a hand fasting ceremony in the stone circle yesterday. So it was the ritual here, the ceremony here, then a party after, which is why I've got the sunglasses and hat on today. It seems particularly bright this morning. I'm feeling a little bit fragile. So the site is used quite often now for celebrations at the solstices, at Yule time, for weddings and other rituals and events. And it was investigated in 1978 by the Dragon Project, who were researching earth energies at various sites such as this. So something else that happened in 1978 was that episodes of Doctor Who were filmed here. That was a series called Stones of Blood, and it was Tom Baker as the Doctor. And the stones here stood in for the site in the story, which was actually set in Cornwall at a place called Boscawen, I believe. I'm not sure why they chose here rather than Cornwall. I'm guessing maybe it was a lot easier to get all the film crew and everyone from the studios to Oxfordshire rather than all the way down to Cornwall. So these are the Whispering Knights, and what this structure was an entranceway to a dolmen or burial chamber. So what we have is 4 upright stones and a large capstone that would have gone over the top. So these would have formed the opening, the gateway to a burial chamber. And this is said to be the oldest funerary structure in the UK. So the Whispering Knights has this folklore attached to it that I touched on earlier, where a farmer decided to take the capstone away to use as a bridge over a brook or a stream. And it took 24 horses to drag the stone down to the stream, and it was put in place. When the people came down the next morning to use this new bridge, they found that the stone had somehow been flipped over during the night. So I imagine with a great amount of effort they put it back the right way again, and of course the next morning the stone was flipped over again. Having seen this, the farmer thought, well, perhaps it's best to put the stone back in place, back to its rightful position. So he brought all the horses out again, but this time it only took 1 horse to drag the stone back. And the last stone that stands on its own just across the road from the circle is the King's Stone. This is said to date to around 1500 BC. And again, no one's totally sure of its purpose. It believed it could have been the marker for a burial mound. Now, it wasn't originally this shape, this rather odd sort of top-heavy shape, I suppose you'd call it. But it looks like this now because over the centuries, people have chipped parts of it off. And there was a lot of local folklore attached to this. It was said to be a fertility stone. If local girls sat here on Midsummer's Eve, for example, not only was it said to increase their chances of fertility, but if they listened very closely, they would hear the name whispered of their future husband. I'm told there was even another fertility ritual that involved rubbing your bare breasts against the stone, but I certainly won't be trying that today. So, as I say, it's a very old site, a lot of history around here, as there is in so many places in the UK. We're very lucky with that, and I think it's great that you can go and visit these sites and they are being actively protected, because of course, as we mentioned, a lot of the stones from the circle were taken for various reasons, and as we just heard that story about the farmer taking the capstone from the Whispering Knights as well. Not uncommon, you hear a lot of that. People destroyed Roman ruins and Roman buildings to use the stone for new buildings. It happened in medieval times, and of course, as we see with the King's Stone as well, people are happy to sort of chip bits away for souvenirs. So luckily that sort of thing doesn't happen anymore, and I think it's great, and I think it's important that you can come and visit these sites and capture something of the atmosphere of how they must have looked and how it must have felt when they were originally created. So we've got the King's Stone Bronze Age, we've got the Whispering Knights Neolithic, and we've got the Stone Circle, which is dated around 2500 BC. So a lot of history around here, and that history continues on into later times as well. Because in March 2015, Saxon grave was unearthed here of a woman, seemingly a very important woman. There are a lot of different artifacts buried with her, and there have been at least 13 or 14 other quite important Saxon burial sites uncovered in this area as well. So obviously this place held its importance for many hundreds of years. So that's our Innsmouth excursion for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. It's certainly lovely being out in the glorious Oxfordshire countryside, even with a slight hangover. It's a lovely part of the world, and the stones here are really worth a visit. And don't forget, if you're into weird fiction and folklore and horror and so on, to give a listen to the Innsmouth Book Club, our fortnightly podcast, and also Strange Shadows, our podcast covering the weird fiction of Clark Ashton Smith. And if you'd like to point your browser to innsmouth.uk, you'll find out details of our upcoming event in September this year, the Innsmouth Literary Festival, which is going to have authors, guest speakers, film screenings, traders, games going on. Really a day packed with Lovecraftian goodness. We hope to see you there. So, until next time, take care.